The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have a fantastic guest for you today, but before we jump into the conversation, let me just take a minute to remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. We've got all of our episodes, a merch store, news feed, council on lighting controls startup and integration, and even training opportunities that you can take advantage of. But let's get into this conversation. So today we have Milton. Milton, do you mind just giving us a quick breakdown on who you are and what you do?
Sure, glad to. I'm Milton Davis, and I guess I've been a veteran of the lighting controls manufacturing industry for about 38 years now. I've had various roles, both as working in the field as a lighting designer, technician, park engineer and theme parks, field engineer, and working on through doing field service. Currently, I'm a software and hardware engineer for Doug Fleenor Design. Along the way, too, I've managed to do a few other things, worked on a lot of very interesting projects, everything from the Sydney Olympics lighting control system, which is one of the first really large Ethernet systems, and continued on various projects throughout my career and ended up at Doug Fleenor Design here. Also part of ESTA's Control Protocols Working Group. I'm sure we'll be talking about that a little later today. And I'm also an ETCP certified instructor and certificate holder there. So, people say, "Are you in the entertainment industry?" I guess I'm making a bit of a career of it, and it seems like it's going to stick. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, Milton. I mean,
Sure.
You have so much experience and knowledge, and it's really just such a pleasure to have you on. And this is going to be a shorty, so we don't have a whole lot of time, but we definitely want to have you back on in the future to hear about all these projects you were talking about and other projects you get involved. I mean, these are like such amazing things, and to be involved in those projects, I'm sure a lot of people would love to just be a fly on the wall and hear about all of that. But I mean, really, the one of the reasons the reason we have you on today is to talk primarily about this event coming up, which is in October, which is called Plugfest. Now, do you mind just explaining a brief amount about what Plugfest is?
Sure, glad to. Yeah, Plugfest is a really interesting little offshoot of ESTA, and it's an independent operation where it's it's really sort of a geek fest where we invite people to bring in manufacturers, especially to bring in equipment both in prototype stage and in full-on production, and it allows us in a controlled environment to plug all this stuff together and see, do these things actually work together in the real world? And without the pressure of a customer looking over our shoulder, without the pressure of production, just an environment where we can plug things together and say, oh dear, who let the smoke out? And see what happens. And because it's a group of engineering people, it's an opportunity to look at it from an engineering point of view and say, aha, here's the packet of data you sent, and here was my response, and here's where we have a problem. It's also an opportunity to prove that the standards that ESTA writes are actually working. So very often we'll have products coming in that are written by some of the members to a draft standard that's not even released, just to prove that the concepts work. And we'd much rather have that happen at the Plugfest rather than out in the field. And it's totally unique environment in that we have competitors sitting in the same room together with their software source code open to each other. So it's a completely non-denominational, non-judgmental environment that we can all come together and solve problems before they get in the field. And that's the whole point of this.
No,
We have,
it's a fantastic
go ahead.
idea. I love this because, it really does create a collaborative environment instead of an
Yeah.
adversarial environment for all of these groups. There's so much at
Exactly.
stake when functionality is on the line and when technicians are setting things up and programming them. So to have this environment where it's a no judgments kind of space where it's just sort of like, okay, what happened? Does the standard hold up? Are we really giving
Yeah,
good guidance for these manufacturers, or do we need to go back and revise some of these things? So I think this is a really
right,
fantastic resource that personally I haven't heard of until this year, and
Hmm.
and I think it's as a result, I'm sure a lot of other people haven't heard of this as well, and so
yeah.
it's an under recognized resource that really could support a lot of these groups, especially manufacturers that turn their projects into beta testing environments.
Exactly. And parts of the key of that, I also understand this is the 20th Plugfest event we've sponsored.
Wow.
So it's been sort of a well-kept
Wow.
secret indeed, but we want to bring more people into it so that we have better compliance across the board. We do not allow sales and marketing people into the room. Period. No sales, no
Interesting.
marketing. It's
Interesting.
just it's just it's just
Yeah.
engineering folks. And the event is free of charge. If you can get yourself to Dallas, to the Dallas Fort Worth Marriott Solana Hotel, which is in Westlake, Texas, if you can get yourself to the hotel, pay for your room, the event is free, and
Mhm.
we're glad to have folks there.
That's interesting. So you guys have been doing this for 20 years, and like Webster mentioned, this is the first time I've ever heard about it. So that's how did it start, right? 20 years ago or 21 years ago when this was a dream, how did this all start? Do you know? Were you part of it then?
Yeah, definitely. I was part of it, and it wasn't 20 years ago, but this is the 20th event. We used to do this
Got it.
event two times a year, and of course, we sort of
Okay.
missed out on the event during COVID, and I can't remember the exact first year we did it, but it was some time ago. It was on the order of 10, 12 years ago.
Got it.
And the way it came about was indeed mostly with the birthing process of the RDM protocol, remote device
Mm.
management.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I wandered in uh, to the ESTA group and said, "Look, I made an RDM product here, I think, but I don't know if it works or not. I wrote it to the draft standard." And so we started, a couple of people plugged some things together. We had some conversations. And there were a couple of people within the ESTA Control Protocols Working Group who were very instrumental. Uh, to drop a couple of names, Scott Blair of Megapixel
Mm.
Systems and Eric Johnson, who used to be with High End Systems. He's now part of Cisco Systems, the
Mm.
routers. And those guys were coming from Austin, Texas, and it was a convenient drive for them to come to Dallas. And
Mm.
they brought a lot of stuff, the outlet strips, the test equipment, and things that we might need there. And mostly those couple of guys in conjunction with ESTA said, we need to prove that our standards work. We don't know until it's too late. So
Right.
they did this sort of inaugural thing. Let's try out DMX things and RDM things and see if they work. And it's been being refined and growing ever since. It used to be a 3-day event over the prior Plugfest, and this one we've expanded to a 4-day event. There's
Mhm.
also a European counterpart to us. The Plaza Group sponsors their version of Plugfest, which has been variously in the UK and in
Mm.
France. Uh, and theirs has a very European sense to it. Ours has a very American sense to it. But in
Right.
the end, it is all about bringing us all together testing protocols. I've mentioned DMX and RDM. We're also putting a lot of emphasis on RDM net, the ability to do RDM over Ethernet. And gosh, what else? We'll even bring in 0 to 10 volt analog controls and evaluate things like that. So anything that's an ESTA standard, we want to bring it in and see what's working, what's not.
And so I recognize we kind of glossed over this, but for a lot of our listeners, they might not know what ESTA is. Do you mind describing what ESTA is?
You know, I'm going to get the letters wrong. It's an Entertainment Technology Services Association, and I believe I'm right on that. God help me if I've got it wrong. Anyway,
I think the key word there, though, is entertainment.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's the thing
We're
that people
primarily
will.
focused. Yeah, we're primarily entertainment based, and we touch a lot of different aspects of entertainment and writing standards. We are an ANSI recognized standards writing organization. And I am the co-chair of the Control Protocols Working Group. We're responsible for producing standards like DMX 512, Remote Device Management, RDM, Streaming ACN, SACN, RDM net. We do have a 0 to 10 volt analog standard. Other groups within ESTA, there are a lot of working groups, and they deal with things like electrical power, photometrics, pyrotechnics. They've just started a firearm safety thing, outdoor stages. You'll recall a few years ago when there were a lot of outdoor stages that were getting hit by disasters and falling down and killing people. Well, a lot of people came along and said, "Whoa, what are we going to do about this?" And ESTA said, "We have a standard for that. If you'll follow it, your stages won't fall down." Suddenly, there was a lot of attention to things like that.
Yeah.
I'm grateful in control protocols that we don't deal with life and death situations. We're just dealing with bits and bytes for the most part.
Right.
But they are ESTA covers a wide range of entertainment standards. And we want everybody represented there. We've got manufacturers, we want users, we want rental houses, we want system integrators, we want end users.
Yeah.
We had a fellow, I don't know if you gents ever knew a fellow named Roger Latin, but Roger was a well-known Hollywood gaffer and grip kind of guy. And he was always at ESTA meetings before he passed away, and he always was participating, and he was bringing the end user, or as he referred to himself as, I'm one of the end losers. And he would come in and give us a real world perspective, because it's very easy for the manufacturers and engineers to fall into their white ivory tower syndrome and say, and forget how the real world works. Roger would bring that in. That's sort of one of my roles as well, because over my career, I've commissioned over 2,000 lighting systems around the world.
Wow.
So I've had that experience of, the theater catching fire, raw sewage being dumped on dimmer racks, contractors, contractors who are up against time limits, in addition to the entertainment stuff. And everything that goes with that. God bless them all. But so, ESTA brings in all kinds of personalities and all different walks of life. And we value that in terms of writing the standards. Because if we write standards and no one uses them, what good have we done?
Right.
And the earliest example being something like DMX 512. It was originally written by the USITT, U.S. Institute of Theater Technology, and it was a 7-page document. That was lovely. It had truck-size holes in the parameters, and USITT is great, but they are not a recognized standards-making organization.
Sure.
So USITT turned over DMX 512 to ESTA. They retained ownership, but they said, ESTA, can you please turn the 7 pages into a real ANSI standard?
Hmm.
80 pages later, we came up with DMX 512A, which
Right.
which essentially closed all of the loopholes and explained how the standard is supposed to work.
Right.
So that's been ESTA's role, writing standards that people can use. DMX
Yeah.
512 was the least common denominator at the time for getting information from control consoles to dimmers because
Well,
there
and
were
you
dimmers.
just came
Yeah.
out
Hmm.
with the new DMX compliance standard,
Yep.
which
Yes,
is new this year. So, are you anticipating testing the standard at Plugfest this year?
absolutely. We always do. And the DMX compliance standard is a really good thing. We intend to do more documents of that sort.
Mm,
Are you compliant with RTM? Are you compliant with strain and
Hmm.
ACN, et cetera?
Sure.
DMX was the first one to take a shot at.
right.
And it's the question of, I can read the DMX standard, but how do I interpret it? And the
Mm-hmm.
compliance document gives you a set of parameters to essentially say, does your DMX implementation do this? It's supposed to behave
Right.
this way.
And
And
that was on the heels of manufacturers basically kind of doing whatever they want. I mean, there are several brands
Yeah.
out there that market DMX, and I'm using air
Right.
quotes here
yes,
because it's not really DMX 512. It's their own version of it. It still communicates with anything DMX
yes,
512, but it's not compliant to the
maybe,
standard now.
Yeah. Maybe
maybe.
is a great point.
Maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah,
And
maybe.
there's an article I wrote for Estes Protocol magazine a few years ago, and it says it's titled DMX Compliance Again, because after
Mm,
20 years, you'd think that we'd all have figured it out. But we came across
nope.
situations where, particularly manufacturers who don't necessarily speak English,
Right.
might have a legitimate interpretation of the standard, and we scratch our heads and go, No, that's not what we meant." And that's
Yeah,
what the compliance document is meant to help out with,
sure.
because it is uh, it is easy to label something as DMX and get it to work with one thing, but not with another. And so far as enforcing compliance, I'm about the closest thing there is to DMX police, and I'm really menacing, and I got a lot of teeth, right? Yeah, it's up to each of us. But I
Right.
do get manufacturers who send me products and say, "Is this compliant with DMX?" And I've got my own suite of things that I do personally at Doug Fleenor Design
Right.
to validate that. But now we've got a
Sure.
document that we can work against, and someone can say, "Has your product qualified against this document?" And
So I
that's
was
uh,
curious. I was curious about this. So with the compliance standard, and you're the perfect person to ask, was there or is there any thought behind implementing some sort of stamp or sticker on devices to say that they're compliant? Because this is something we see a lot with those third-party manufacturers or devices direct from China that people buy on Amazon or who knows where they bought
yeah,
it, right? And unfortunately it ends up on these architectural projects and people want to blame programming and blame this when it's bad hardware. So is there any thought to doing
yeah.
something where there's a stamp or sticker so that you can prove a device is compliant?
There was a lot of discussion on that specific subject. Here's the rub. ESTA is a standards making body. They do not warrant their standards to be not containing intellectual property. ESTA does not do patent searches. ESTA does not
Hmm.
offer a warranty. Now, it doesn't prohibit a third party from coming along and making their own stamp and saying, I have tested this to this standard and put my own sticker across it. But it's going to be up to a third party to do that. ESTA legally cannot make that kind of
Right.
marking.
It's kind of like if UL only did standards then they wouldn't have that UL listing. Some other group would have to come up with a listing, but because they both do testing and standards and warranty and all that, they do have the UL listing. But I'm sure on the heels of this, there are going to be groups that are going to pop up that say, we've got a sticker. We'll verify it. We'll certify it. We'll guarantee it.
Yeah. If there's profit to be made by doing so, there will be a company doing that.
100%. But no, I mean, it's really interesting to hear about these inner workings, because I think that is one of the challenges going forward. Lighting designers are going to be leaning on this standard, especially in written specifications or book specs, where they reference DMX 512A all the time. And now they got to add this new reference standard to be able to say, okay, it must comply. And the added heavy lift to a lot of lighting designers is they're basically going to have to take the manufacturer's word that they're compliant, unless, again, there's this entity that says, okay, it's ULX 512A compliant.
Yes, and that could very well happen. And as you get into the system level, because sitting on the workbench, a lot of the stuff works just great. When you get into the larger environment, there is an ESTA cabling standard for DMX. So you can check against that. And things that are Ethernet based, obviously, there's EIA-TIA 568 standard for cabling. And that can be validated in that way. So we're sort of moving in that direction. We're a small industry. We're sort of learning on the heels of our bigger brothers in the networking industry.
Well,
and such.
And a lot of, where DMX most often is found is in the entertainment temporary installation environment rather than the permanent installation environment, which is really where I see this standard coming into play and being very necessary. In the temporary entertainment world, you rented a really crummy fixture, you'll never rent that fixture again. If you buy a really crummy fixture and have it mudded into your ceiling, well, that's a huge effort to try to rip that back out and replace it. So having this standard is such a safety net for the permanent installation environment. And so it's really great to see ESTA start to come into the permanent installation environment more and more. I mean, I know you guys had always been to a degree involved in permanent installation, but it really is kind of becoming this collaboration between other groups like LCA, NEMA, and ESTA. So, anyways, go ahead.
As an example, just locally, I got a call from my local college, Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And they said, hey, can you come out and take a look at an RDM installation we're having trouble with? And sure enough, it's, products that from the entertainment industry being used to light up a classroom area. And, there are two kinds of electrical contractors in the world. Those who do entertainment lighting controls for a living, and those contractors who will do one entertainment lighting installation in their career. This group was the latter, and not their fault. They didn't know what they were getting into.
Right.
So I got to go out and educate these guys on how they can, the proper cabling, daisy chaining, termination at the end, all this stuff in entertainment we just know. But yes, the getting into the permanent lighting thing, it's happening more and more venues are in need of what I'll call real-time control of lighting. Versus something like BACnet that's all about building management. If the light turns on within 15 seconds, you're doing good. Entertainment lighting, entertainment lighting. If I'm off a tenth of a second, I have failed.
Right.
So, and we're moving in more that direction. And DMX is a good example because it's extremely robust. It just wants to work, and there are plenty of installations out there that are working that really shouldn't.
Right. Yes, absolutely. But anyways, we're almost out of time here, but we'll definitely have you back on. I mean, you definitely are a wealth of information, Milton. we really
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
you having on the show and talking about all of this, because it's a niche, and we're already part of a niche. So you're a niche of a niche of a niche, and so
Yep.
helping bring attention to this for those who really want to learn and up their game when it comes to lighting controls. These are great resources. And so those listening, if you're interested in going to Plugfest, you should strongly consider going, because it sounds like an amazing opportunity. I personally want to go and hope to go. But it sounds like it's a sandbox collaborative environment where you're just
Yep.
testing equipment out and making sure that it works. And I really think that a lot of manufacturers in the permanent installation part of our industry could also benefit from such an event. And
We're going to
so
have a bunch of them there.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So, if you want to see, things tested to rigorous standards, definitely check it out. That's the primary motivation of this particular shorty episode here, is to get the word out and get people interested in this. Because, if you're like a super nerd and love your lighting controls terminology and all that, if you go to conferences for the schmoozing and the food, maybe not the best option here. But if you really, really like digging into the details, reading standards, understanding the ins and outs of devices, absolutely check this out. We'll have a link in the description if you want to sign up for it. But additionally, ESTA is a great group that supports a lot of this equipment and a lot of the entertainment side of things. But if you don't know DMX, if you're unfamiliar with DMX, ESTA has your back when it comes to requirements and standards. And so they put out a magazine every quarter, is it?
Quarter. Yep. With
Yeah,
Protocol.
which Protocol magazine. It's a great resource, free for anybody. And also, there's just some really great resources through that channel to learn about DMX and learn about the entertainment side of things. So really worth checking those things out if you want to increase your knowledge and awareness of all of these things. But Milton, thank you so much. It's been really amazing having you on here.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you offering today, and hope to see folks at Plugfest. So.
Awesome. Milton, thank you so much for everything that you do for ESTA and for all of the standards and for ETCP. We really appreciate everything that you've done for the industry, for all of us. Webster and I both come from the entertainment industry. So thank you for everything that you've done and continue to do for the industry. We truly appreciate that.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I will take a minute to close this out and remind everyone today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association.
And it's financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, or NAILD. Check out our website, lightingcontrolspodcast.com. Got all of our episodes, merch store, news feed, and lots more. So check it out if you haven't. But until then, thank you everyone for joining us. And Milton, again, really appreciate you joining us here today. This was awesome.